Namaste everyone, welcome to YCB Level 1 200 Hours Yoga Teachers Training with Ayushman Yoga. My name is Nidhi and I am going to be your companion in this journey. Let's begin. Right, so introduction to major schools of yoga: Jnana, Bhakti, Karma, Patanjali and Hatha. So let's talk about the Jnana Yoga first. So Jnana Yoga is path of knowledge. So aspirants who have curious nature or jigyasu pravatti, right, or an urge to know, they are naturally inclined to walk on this path, right? This is considered as one of the most difficult path of yoga because it involves a lot of introspection, self-analysis, self-discipline, right? The principal techniques followed by Jnana yogis are contemplation and meditation. Now, as per our culture, the learning happens in 3 stages, right? These 3 stages are mandatory for the Jnana Yogi aspirants, right? Now, these stages come from the time when learning used to happen in a Guru-Sishya format, right? So, the first stage is referred as Shravana, which means to hear, right? Whatever the knowledge Guru is giving to the Sishya, to hear that. But in the present context, it can also be referred as to read. Second is Manan, to contemplate. To contemplate onto the knowledge, whatever it is you have heard or read. To question the knowledge, to draw your own conclusion. Right? This culture does not teach us to blindly believe whatever it is you have heard or whatever it is you have read, right? Instead, it is important to contemplate onto the knowledge and draw your own conclusions. The third stage is referred as Nijidhyasana. This is the stage of being one with the knowledge, right? There is one more concept which is important for Jnana Yogi practitioner, that is referred as Sadhana Chatushtaya. Sadhana means practice. Chatushtaya refers to the 4 attributes, right? So these can be understood as the eligibility criteria for the Jnana Yogis. First is Vivek, the discriminating faculty, being able to discriminate between real and unreal. Vairagya means detachment from the fruits of action. Then Shad Shampat. So these are 6 qualities which are collectively referred as Shad Shampat. These are Sam, means calmness. Dam, control of senses. Uparati, withdrawal of the senses. Titiksha, endurance. Shraddha, faith. Samadhan, staying focused on the goal, right? So these 6 are collectively known as Shad Shampat. Then the 4th attribute is Mumukshatva, which means yearning for freedom or moksha. Then the path of Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga is a path of intense love towards the Supreme. It is considered as the most easiest and the most certain way to achieve liberation in this yoga. Right? This path is famously taught by Sri Krishna to Arjun as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Right? So as per Bhagavad Gita, there are 4 types of devotees. These are Artha, means distressed. Artharthi, the desirer for wealth. Jigyasu, the inquisitive. And Jnani, who is in search of the knowledge of Absolute. Right? Now there is another very popular text about Bhakti Yoga. It's called Narada Bhakti Sutra. This is a collection of 84 sutras and this is believed to be written by Devarshi Narad himself. Right? This text talks about developing the selfless love towards God. The very popular concept of Navavida Bhakti comes from Narada Bhakti Sutra. So Navavida Bhakti is a 9 limbs process of worshipping the Supreme. These are Shravanam, Kirtanam, chanting, Smaranam, remembering, Padasevanam, service, Archanam, worshipping, Vandanam, saluting, Dasyam, being the servant, Sakhyam, friendship, Atmanivedanam, total surrender. Now let's move on to the Karma Yoga, the path of action. So the core concept of Karma Yoga can be understood as one should not be attached to the consequences of the action. One should consider the success as well as the failure to be equal. As Shri Krishna says, Yogastha Kuru Karmani Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjay. Right? Get rid of the attachment. Siddha Asiddhyo Samo Bhutva. Siddha success, Asiddha failure, Samo Bhutva. Consider them equal. Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Such equanimity is called yoga. Now, this is a very distinguished thing about this culture, that this culture does not teach us to only chase the success or the happiness, right? Instead, this culture teaches us to be balanced, irrespective of the situation. Siddha, asiddhyo, samo bhutva. Right? Success, failure. Pleasure, pain. Happiness, sadness. In everything, be balanced, be neutral. Right? Shri Krishna also says that do not be attached with the action itself, and do not consider yourself to be the reason of your action as well as the consequences of your action. Right? Now try implementing these concepts of Karma Yoga in your life and see what happens. Now Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So in the first lecture of this course, we have already studied how Patanjali Yoga Sutra was written and the legend behind the Patanjali's birth. Now let's look at the text. So Patanjali Yoga Sutra is divided into 4 chapters. Samadhi Pad, Sadhana Pad, Vibhuti Pad and Kaivalya Pad. Samadhi Pad talks about the goal of human life, Samadhi. Sadhana Path talks about the means or the practices to achieve that goal. Vibhuti Path talks about the siddhis or the supernatural power which one can attain as they start practicing the practice giving in the sadhana path. And Kaivalya Path is about the moksha or liberation. Now let's look at some of the very popular concepts mentioned in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. First is Ashtanga Yoga. So Ashtanga Yoga is an 8-limbed practice, right? First is Yama, the social constraints. These are Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. Then Niyama, personal constraint. Shaucha means cleanliness. Santosha, contentment. Tapa, austerity. Swadhyaya, self-study. Ishwar Pranidhana, surrender to God. Third limb is Asana. So Patanjali defines Asana as Sthira Sukham Asanam. Asana is any state which is stable and comfortable. Then Pranayama. So 4 types of Pranayama is suggested in Yoga Sutra. Modification of inhalation, modification of exhalation, stoppage of the breath, and the 4th pranayama can be understood as a transcendental state. Now these 4 limbs, Yama, Niyama, Asana and Pranayama are referred as the Bahiranga Yoga, right? Because the senses are still connected to the outside world. Then the 5th limb is referred as Pratyahar, withdrawal of the sense organs with their respective object. Right? Now let's try to understand this with few examples. Has it ever happened with you that you are listening to the music by plugging in the earphones in the ears, but you still miss on to the lyrics? Or when you are engaged into something so deeply that somebody calls your name and you didn't hear it? Right? Now these things do not happen because we do not have a perfectly functioning ear, right? It happens because at that time, the section of the brain which processes the audio information is engaged somewhere else or is absolutely withdrawal from that input. Right? Pratyahara is a practice of bringing in this withdrawal voluntarily. Withdrawal of the sense organ, which is ear in this case, with its respective object, which is sound in this example. Pratyahara is referred as a bridge between Bahiranga Yoga, the first 4 limbs which we have discussed, and Antaranga Yoga, the 3 limbs which we are going to discuss now. So, 6th is Dharana, concentration. Now, concentration is the process when we are trying to focus on our selected object. So, what happens when we do that? A lot of other thoughts come into the mind. We are trying to focus onto the object, but still there are other thoughts present in the mind as well. But we are trying. This process of trying to concentrate onto the object is referred as concentration, dharana. Then the 7th, dhyan, meditation. When we are able to concentrate onto the object, right? When all the thoughts in the mind are about the object only. As Patanjali says, tatra pratyayekatanata dhyanam. Tatra pratyay, object, ektanata dhyanam. An uninterrupted flow of thoughts towards the object is dhyan, meditation. Then the 8th limb is samadhi. So it is a transcendental state which needs to be experienced. It is said to be a stage of being one with the object. So explaining this experience into words is very difficult. For example, if one has never tasted sweet, and if I have to explain how the sweet tastes like, then no matter how beautifully I would explain the taste, the only definite way for you to understand the sweet taste is to taste the sweet by yourself, isn't it? So samadhi is said to be an experience, right? But still, let's try to understand this by taking an example of the candle meditation or trataka. So what happens? We light the candle and candle is in front of us, and now we are seated for meditation, right? And let's assume that we have already mastered the pratyahara. Now we can withdraw the senses, and when we sit for the meditation, the outside world is not the problem, right? So now we are trying to gaze at the blue flame, the stage of dharana. Right? So there are a lot of thoughts which will be there in the mind, but we are still trying to concentrate only onto the blue flame. Let's see we succeed into that. And now we are able to concentrate only onto the blue flame, the state of meditation. Right? All the thoughts in our mind at that point of time are only about the blue flame. Nothing else matters, just me and the blue flame. The state of meditation, dhyan. Then, as per the text, there comes a stage wherein one starts to feel the candle within oneself. The heat of the candle, the flickering flame of the candle, everything. One can start feeling it within oneself. This is the stage which is referred as being one with the object, the stage of samadhi. Patanjali mentions 3 types of samadhi: sabija samadhi, nirbija samadhi, and dharma megha samadhi. Right? So Ashtanga Yoga. Next concept is vivek khyati. Vivek khyati means the discriminating faculty. Being able to discriminate between Purusha and Prakriti. So Purush here can be understood as the consciousness, as the self, and Prakriti can be understood as the material energy. Patanjali says that the determined practice of Ashtanga Yoga induces Vivek Khyati. Next is Chitta Vritti. So vrittis are the fluctuation in mind, and these can be of 2 types. Klishta means unpleasant, and Aklishta means the pleasant vritti. Patanjali says there are 5 types of vritti. All of these can be klishta or aklishta, pleasant or unpleasant. These are Pramad, Viparya, Vikalpa, Nidra, Smratyaha. So, Pramad Vritti. Pramad Vritti can be of 3 types. Pratyaksha, Anuman, Agama. Pratyaksha means direct perception. Right? Anuman means inference. Agama means competent evidence. Right? So, the information which we received through these 3 sources, and the fluctuation which that information causes in our mind is termed as the Pramad Vritti. Now, this information can be pleasant as well as unpleasant. Viparya Vritti, false knowledge, right? For example, misunderstanding rope as a snake, believing the rumors, the gossip, etc. So the fluctuation, the vrittis caused by false information is referred as viparya. Then vikalpa, fantasy, imagination, something which is in the mind, right? So the fluctuation caused in the mind because of a fantasy, because of an imagination is referred as vikalpa. Then the nidra. Now this might be one of the most difficult vrittis to understand for the very reason that we don't really know what happens when we sleep, right? All we know is we either slept well or we did not sleep well. All the remaining thought patterns are said to be absent during the nidra vritti. Hence, it is understood to be a state of voidness dominated by tamas. Then the smriti. The fluctuation in the mind caused by the memory is referred as the smriti vritti. Right? Then chitta vritti nirodha upaya. The ways to get rid of these chitta vritti, these fluctuations of mind. Patanjali says, Abhyas Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirodha. Abhyas, repeated practice, Vairagya, detachment. Right? By repeated practice and the detachment, one can get rid of these fluctuations. The practice which is mentioned here is understood to be the practice of Ashtanga Yoga. Right? The next concept is klesha. So kleshas are which generate pain in our experience. There are 5 klesha: avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh. Out of these all 5, avidya, the ignorance, is said to be the mother of all klesha. Also in our culture, ignorance does not mean not knowing, right? Ignorance means knowing the opposite of the truth. So it is not the voidness of knowledge. It is knowing the untruth, the false knowledge. Right? Now, klesha manifests in human beings in 4 stages. Prasupta means dormant. Tanu means weak. Vichinna, oscillating. Udara, abundant. Right? So one should try to keep the kleshas in the tanu or the weak stage, and Patanjali suggests the practice of Kriya Yoga to achieve just that. Right? So Kriya Yoga is Tapaha, Swadhyay, Ishwar Pranidhanani, Kriya Yoga. Tapaha, austerity. Ishwar Pranidhan, surrender to God. Swadhyay, self-analysis. Right? These 3 are collectively referred as Kriya Yoga. Now do not get confused with the same being mentioned at the part of Niyama as well. Right? These 3 are separately also mentioned by Patanjali and termed as Kriya Yoga. Right? Next is Chitta Bhumi. So Chitta Bhumi refers to the state of mind or the mental plane. Right? So this concept is elaborated in Yoga Bhashya, which is a commentary of the Yoga Sutra by Ved Vyas. Right? So Ved Vyas explains 5 types of mental plane or Chitta Bhumi. These are Mudha Chitta, which is dominated by Tamas Guna, also known as the donkey mind. Kshipta Chitta, dominated by the Rajas Guna, also known as the monkey mind. Vikshipta Chitta, this state oscillates between Sattva and Rajas and known as the butterfly mind. Now, you would notice most of us are in Vikshipta state of mind. Sometimes at complete peace, sometimes anxious, overwhelmed, restless. Isn't it? Then Ekagra Chitta. This is dominated by Sattva and referred as one-pointed mind. And the 5th is Niruddha or Nirguna. This is the transcendental state referred to as absolute focus or a state of no mind. Now the concept of Ishwar Pranidhana. So Ishwar Pranidhana refers to complete surrender to Supreme, to God. Right? Now Ishwar here does not refer to a personal deity. Instead, it is one universal power referred as Purusha Vishesha. Also, it is important to notice that Patanjali does not mention any rites, ritual or worshipping ways towards the Supreme. Right? And that is why yoga is not a religious practice. right? It is a lifestyle based on oneness, right? So Ishwar Pranidhana, complete surrender to the universal power. Next is Chitta Vikshepa and their associate, Antarayas and Sahibhava. So Chitta Vikshepas are the obstacles in the path of sadhana. These are 9. Vyadhi, physical disease. Stayan, mental laziness. Sanshaya, doubt. Pramad, carelessness. Alasya, physical laziness. Avirati, stubborn attachment to the sense object. Bhranti darshan, false perception. Alabdha bhumikatva, failing to attain a firm ground in the practice. Anavasthitatva, unable to maintain that firm ground. Now these 9 obstacles, these 9 antarayas are accompanied by 4 sahibhuvas. Dukha, unhappiness. Daurmanasya, despair. Angame jayatva, tremors in the body. Swasa prashwasa, erratic breathing pattern. Irregularity in the breath. Right? Now the last concept from Patanjali Yoga Sutra which we will see is Chitta Prasadana. Chitta Prasadana is a concept wherein Patanjali suggests to take 4 attitudes towards 4 kind of people. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekshana. Sukh, Dukh, Punya, Apunya, Vishyana. Bhavanat, Chitta Prasadana. So friendship towards the people who are happy. Compassion towards the people who are unhappy. Mudit, be glad. Be well-wishers to people who are virtuous. Upekshana, be indifferent or neutral towards people who are of negative qualities. Right? So, this is about the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. This much information, all of these concepts are sufficient for this course. Now, the last topic of today's lecture is Hatha Yoga. So, as we have studied before, Hatha Yoga is sourced from Tantra, right? The objective of Hatha Yoga is to achieve the spiritual absorption or known as Raj Yoga or Samadhi or Kaval, right? So, Hatha system propounds achieving a balance within oneself. So, the system says there are 72,000 nadis in one's body. Right? What is a nadi? Nadi is a complex mechanism through which prana flows. Right? These are invisible to the naked eyes and so far invisible to all the instruments which have been developed so far as I know. Right? Now out of these 72,000 nadis, 3 nadis are of most significance, most importance. Ida, Pingla and Sushumna. Ida Nadi dominates the left nostril, represents the moon and the feminine aspect, and it is connected to the right side of the brain. Pingala Nadi dominates the right nostril, represents the sun, the masculine aspect, and it is connected to the left side of the brain. So the text says that usually one of the nadi is dominant in an individual. Right? The idea is to achieve a balance between Ida and Pingla. Right? When one achieves this balance, that is when a perfect functioning of right and left brain, of masculine and the feminine aspect, the creativity and the executive aspect of one's functioning can be achieved. And when Ida and Pingla gets balanced, a third nadi known as Sushumna, which originates at the root of the spine and rises up through the spinal cord, gets activated. It is the activation of Sushumna Nadi which gives base to the higher spiritual realization, higher human functioning. Now, Hatha Yoga practice usually consists of practices like Shatkarma, internal cleansing, Asana, Pranayama, Mudra and Bandha, and Dhyana practice or Samadhi practices, right? Now, different teachers have suggested their own perspective on how to practice Hatha Yoga, but the basic structure of the practice more or less remains the same. right? For example, a very prominent teacher of Hatha Yoga, Sage Swatma Ram Suri, who has also authored Hatha Yoga Pradipika, says that Shat Karma is not a mandatory practice. One should only be doing Shat Karma if one has certain disease or illness in the body. Otherwise, one can directly begin with the asana practice. So, the structure of Hatha Yoga practice given in Hatha Yoga Pradipika has 4 limbs and it is known as Chaturanga Yoga. Another prominent teacher, Sage Gherand, he says that Shat Karma is a mandatory practice and the structure of Hatha Yoga practice suggested by him has 7 limbs and it is known as the Saptanga Yoga or Ghatasya Yoga. Right? So we are going to read about the Hatha Yoga practices in detail in the coming chapters. Right? So that covers all the major parts of yoga. Go through the written material, take the quiz, make good notes, and I will see you in the next lecture.